Last week, the classic Matt and Virgil dyad made a house call to a competing podcast. Yahoo News' flagship podcast, Skullduggery,
Ooh.
hosted by veteran journalist Michael Isikoff and editor Daniel Klaidman, both formerly of Newsweek, now with theoretically existing news source Yahoo News.
Yeah, they're from Newsweek, and remember, for the younger kids, there was a period where the Newsweek was an actual magazine. It came out every week. You could buy it in airports. It was not just an aggregator of nip slips and side boob shenanigans as it is now.
Wasn't it also bought out by one of those competing like Mooney sects, and not the one that bought out IBT where Brendan used to work?
Newsweek was Tina Brown took over, if memory serves.
Oh yeah,
and it was either absorbed by the Daily Beast or merged with it in some fashion, and that didn't work. The Daily Beast, spun out, and Newsweek, I guess, became an orphan.
It's just a poor foundling child wandering the streets.
Just a ragamuffin walking through the news alley.
Story,
sir.
As often happens with orphan news sources, it's been purchased by a religious sect.
Yeah, that's the future. Yeah, just cults.
I wouldn't really call it a cult. It's more
organs.
like a scientific method for living. But we are talking about Yahoo News, and I want to give some context for this. When Matt and I agreed to do this, we regretted it. We had no idea why we said yes to this.
He said, hey, who wants to do the Yahoo News podcast with me? And I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. And then they wanted to do it before noon. And I was like, oh, God, kill me instead.
See, I sympathize with you guys because I feel I have one of my New Year's resolutions is to say no more often. Like, I always say yes because I want to be like an agreeable, likable person. I want to help people out, do their podcast. But then, as the day of comes, I'm almost always just like, why did I agree to do this?
Well, I think
I really, really regret it. But when the offer came through to do Michael Isikoff's podcast, I was just like, nah, it's okay. You guys can have this one.
I think there's some value in leaving the mansion from time to time to, check in, see how the other podcasts are doing.
Yeah. And that was what made it so funny for me, because all I heard was, I didn't know anything else about it. All Virgil said was Yahoo News podcast. Didn't know the name, didn't know who was on it. And so we show up at the HuffPo building in Midtown, or
it's like off Union Square, right?
Yeah.
In Manhattan, and we're ushered into one of those tech campus things. It's like there's a room, there's a big giant lobby, there's a desk, but then there's a big dark room with a bunch of people behind screens, and then giant screens. It literally looked like there was a guy in there talking about where Jason Bourne was and about fucking Black Briar and Treadstone.
It was a legit multi-feed control center for like a real news network would have, but the images on the screens, the chyrons, I recognized none of it.
No, it was very alienating and confusing. And then we went past...
It's a satellite zooming in, and then some guy in a suit is like, oh my God, that's Matt Christman.
And then we go past, of course, because it was around the lunchtime, the mandatory tech free lunch buffet of like Asians rice bowls and shit. And then to this tiny little room where I'm introduced to Michael Isikoff, who I recognized as a big dick reporter from the Clinton and Bush era, the guy who broke the Lewinsky story, who broke a bunch of stories about the war on terror and torture. And I sit down with Virgil in this tiny little room. They close the door and they're settling it up. And I'm just like, oh shit, this is a fucking ambush.
It was a hot room too, so I had to take my clothes off.
He got nice. He was totally nude during that entire interview.
On the way there,
like a little baby seal.
On the way there, I was very hungover and sleepy. I was not on my best. I was feeling very bad. It's that really awful feeling when your body's temperature is just not working. It's just wrong everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm like incredibly hot wearing a winter coat when it's like 25 degrees out.
Yeah, not good.
Not good, folks. Not good. So I demanded to see the snack area, and I got a slice from the Coke Freestyle machine, a Fanta, I suppose, and a banana.
And then we go in there, and they sit us down, and Isikoff explains that he had no idea who we were until 2 weeks ago during Christmas break, when he was confronted by 3 20-somethings who are relatives of his who all listen to Chapo, and they were, I guess, like giving him the okay boomer, old man, your power does not run here. We don't care about your fucking
Yeah, the future is now, old man.
Yeah, it's like we don't care about your takes on the political space. You're fucking fossil. We don't give a shit.
Because keep in mind, Isikoff is, he is a veteran journalist.
Yeah.
And he's an old man. He's like 67. And he was, in the War on Terror, he broke, like, for instance, the story about that we were desecrating Qurans. We were flushing them out down the doo-doo toilet.
Yeah.
And that was like in 2005. And, that was a story that caused riots overseas because it cut against the heart of the Bush administration's message, which is, no, this isn't like a religious thing. We respect Islam and all that shit. And they were actually forced to retract the story, but it came out as a separate report came out a month later saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're desecrating Qurans left and right."
Yeah.
This whole torture base is like a whole like Quran desecration factor.
See, I just remember Isikoff from he was like a perennial guest on like Olbermann and MSNBC at like the height of the Bush administration and the War on Terror, and kind of a perennial thorn in the side of like.
No, I recognized him when he introduced himself. Like, oh shit, I remember you.
He
from
wrote
TV.
a book called Hubris, which was about how the Bush administration lied us to war and how we're torturing people.
I mean, I guess I don't want to jump ahead of you too much, but like that's why when I listened to it, it was so surreal. Like knowing his CV and the questions he was coming up, or like trying to nail you guys with. He's like,
Well, now, are you telling me that you think the CIA is inherently evil?
I'm just like, how do you
that was
fucking-
what when we sat down and after he explained that, I was like, oh shit. This guy wants to own us. Like, he's inviting us on here because he was annoyed by his smug younger relatives, and he wants to, like, show them up, have their heroes on the show, and then flay them. So you'd be like, see, these are the guys you think are smart? No, I'm smart.
So,
grandnephew.
Again, just to set the scene, this was an ambush.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that at the beginning that this is we got you.
Yeah.
And we were not ready for that.
I thought we were just going to be patiently explaining the show and its premise and shit.
So you guys met on Twitter?
Yeah, exactly.
like 30 minutes of that bullshit.
Well, I mean,
wow,
you guys
like Bernie Sanders? That's crazy.
Well, the thing is, you guys basically did explain the premise of the show quite well.
Yeah, and so I'm hungover as shit and dying in this hot room.
Eating a banana.
Yeah, and Matt's like, what's going on?
Yeah, I was like, oh shit.
Matt's like he's like doing a line of coke and the cops walk in.
Yeah, no, because I am incredibly insecure. I think I'm always worried that someone's going to expose my fraudulence. Then I'm like, this is a real reporter here.
He's
this
a real
guy
reporter.
knows his shit.
He doesn't just read books; he writes them.
Yeah,
multiple books. And again, I mean, we thought Isikoff was he was like a critic of the Bush administration, which I guess is the case. But he's also, I'm told, like he's a conservative guy, and I don't think he's necessarily anti-war because, like, generally, if you're like a NatSec reporter for 25 years and you're like held in esteem by other NatSec reporters, that there are pretty narrow parameters. Like there's boundaries you cannot cross.
You
there.
spend way too much time breathing in the fumes at fucking Pentagon and Langley to not be affected by it.
Like the only exception to that would be like Seymour Hersh, but he's mostly hated by his colleagues.
He has his small like collection of sources who are secret, and he's never whoever the hell they are. But like, it's not like he's hanging out at the commissary in like a fucking Alexandria, Virginia or something, or like fucking Tyson's Corners or whatever. So he just, they call him up and he does it. Yeah, because if you spend too much time hanging around with military dudes, you're eventually going to absorb their worldview.
So you should listen to this entire thing, but I want to play 3 representative clips to give you an idea of how this interview went.
No, it's like
we're just
an ironic
started.
an ironic counterpoint between a name that sounds like a hip hop mixtape or something, and then a bunch of squeaky voice nerds talking about politics.
Okay, so look, we're talking here in the second week of January in the aftermath of the news that President Trump has taken out Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guard Quds Force. Are you guys celebrating the death of this enemy of America?
I'm not.
Virgil?
I'm not either. I've been disassociating since the news, and I'm just now kind of putting myself back together.
No, it seems like a disaster and horrible in every way. Very bad. Folks, we don't like to see it.
Yeah, because I want to tease out your thinking here a little bit.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't be there, I think, is our easy sort of slug answer. Is that the United States presence in the Middle East is this attempt to be, the arbiter of whatever, is actually only at every point makes things worse, makes things more fraught. And then we, to explain the chaos we create, decide to blame people actually in the region, like Iran, for destabilization that is all of it comes directly from U.S. intervention. And so the idea that we're going to make anything safer by deepening military actions in the Middle East and doing something as radically destabilizing as attack the top military officer and diplomat for one of the biggest countries in the region is horrifying.
Do you think that that the United States is the main destabilizing presence in the Middle East? I mean, obviously the Iraq War.
Obviously.
Oh yeah, that.
And how would you assess Iran as a destabilizing force?
I mean, they're responding. That's the thing that I can't get over, is the idea every opportunity that Iran has taken to infiltrate themselves into countries from Iraq to Syria. None of these are all vacuums created by American military action and occupation and the chaos unleashed by that. And they actually live there. And it seems insane to me to be condemning a country for trying to stabilize their neighbors on their own terms, because who wouldn't do that when we are insisting on dictating the terms in the Middle East from 5,000 miles away.
So just one follow-up question on that. So do you think that Iran has the right to pursue a nuclear weapon?
I think, honestly, they have a moral responsibility to pursue and acquire a nuclear weapon, because at this point, it should be pretty clear that the only guarantee against the U.S. military aggression is if you have a nuke. So they should get one as soon as they can.
Well, I don't think that's a position that your candidate for president, Bernie Sanders, actually endorses.
Those were the first questions after the preliminary question.
After asking us where we got the name from.
Is that a drug thing?
Yeah.
Which is baffling, because again, Isikoff's a national security interest. He knows how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
And I thought these questions were just fucking with us, because they're kind of delivering it in this smirky way the whole time.
No, they had smug little smiles on their faces the entire time. I would like to say, though, that question, like, are you happy Soleimani is dead? That's literally something that Bill Mitchell put as a poll on his fucking Twitter page.
The other thing that happened like a little bit after that clip you said is the other guy, not Isikoff,
Clayman.
The other guy, he was just like, well, are you concerned at all about like how Iran would use a nuclear weapon to like intimidate Israel? And I don't know if you guys touched on this, but like my response to that is like, well, Israel has like a whole host of nuclear strike and counter-strike options. So if Iran intimidated them with a nuclear weapon, I mean, they'd just be like, that's just deterrent. Like Israel is free to intimidate back with their existing arsenal of nuclear weapons, right?
We're not supposed to talk about that, even though Bibi literally just let it slip the other day that they have nuclear weapons.
So, as this is happening, I'm still kind of disassociating, and I'm just thinking, what? Are they screwing with us? Is this, are you playing devil's advocate here in the competing Beltway garage? And I guess they're not. That's kind of a fucking frightening thought.
Especially since, like, the follow-up to the Soleimani thing about nukes, it presupposes that the Iran has an existing nuclear weapons program, which, I'm sorry, they don't. There's been no evidence that they actually are pursuing a nuke.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
It's purely a thing we have ginned up because they're enriching uranium, which you also use for domestic reasons. So it's like they're buying into a premise that is pure Likud propaganda and then throwing at us like it's a real thing.
Matt, just to slightly push back on you there. I mean, I think they're certainly enriching uranium, as any of the international observers has verified, but is their right to do under the terms of the treaty. But no, I mean, like, they're at such a point where, like, if you can enrich uranium to a certain point, it wouldn't take very much for them to spin it up to the level that you would need to create a nuke.
Also, why even ask any of these questions? Like, you wrote a book about the Bush administration, which was also an incompetent administration, but one that could, dress itself and put the right shoes on the right feet. You wrote a book about how they lied to get us to war in Iraq. And the murder of Soleimani was conducted by a senile game show host who gave the options presented to him about as much scrutiny as he would give a McDonald's drive-through menu.
Yeah. The fish delight, please.
So why this interview literally happened days after that.
Yeah.
When things were still looking incredibly fucking dicey, and when it was just this miserable fucking experience of seeing, like millions of MAGA hogs baying for the murder of millions of people that they never met, and Trump threatening war crimes, and to send this like tiny little hot box in the Yahoo News Center is and like just smirk and giggle about this is kind of appalling.
Yeah. Oh, the reader. It's so funny because I'm sure they imagine themselves to be these stalwart opponents of Trump, but as soon as the state pokes its head out, they're willing to fucking accept anything. I mean, the title of the episode we ended up being on is called "Is Trump our OJ?" I don't even know what that means. I'm not going to find out.
I mean,
don't tell me if you know.
He's a guy that gets away with crimes, I guess.
But it's like, you want OJ if OJ told you actually the killers of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were the Quds Force under the direction of Qasem Soleimani, are you going to believe him?
That's funny. I'm sure it is a reference. Like, OJ is a guy who gets away with crimes and is on Twitter again. But like the crimes that they're like in this analogy, the crimes Trump are getting away with is like, extorting the president of the Ukraine over Hunter Biden.
Right.
Whereas the crime that they're literally saying, "Are you celebrating?" is murder, which is what OJ got away with.
Yes.
I also want to know what's in front of us during this interview. Glademan has a copy of our book, which I think he read. And like Glademan, I think was more fair throughout the interview. It just seemed like his ambition was to like get us on the record at things. Isikoff, however, could not hold back his contempt, which is why you hear him in the interview go on these little tiny like West Wing rants throughout. Like, okay, he like definitely wants to have his version of an argument, which is we say something and then he gives us the real deal.
Yeah.
In front of him was the printout of our Wikipedia page.
I didn't see that.
And in front of me was a banana and only 2 beverages. So I did not. I'm fighting with one arm tied behind my back.
Virgil's health bar is like halfway degraded.
Yeah, and that's
you cannot take much more hit damage.
Like that's bad pool in my opinion. Yeah. Like to limit me to a dual bev situation when I always try wield. So I want to play another clip here, which was also I think a question that exposed quite a bit about the ideas of these hosts.
I hear that you guys are not big fans of the West Wing, and that the West Wing has kind of poisoned a generation of Democratic operatives, that, the belief that you can make, a high-minded speech and transform American politics. My now 15-year-old daughter just discovered West Wing, and she's been binge watching it. So I guess I might be poisoning her mind. So what's the problem with West Wing?
I think the essential problem with West Wing is that it says that what matters in politics is intentions, that the way that political change happens is through
persuasion,
but not of the people, importantly, of other people in the room with you, of the other party. People, the assumption is
because it's a TV show
that
with
everybody.
characters.
Well, right, I know. I'm just saying is that's not what gets communicated. Is that you get Republicans and Democrats in a room and they all want what's best for the country, and you talk it out. And I think that the Obama administration, by their own admission, operated under those principles. They all have said as much, and then they ran into the modern Republican Party in the form of Mitch McConnell, and they were absolutely poleaxed by it because they kept waiting for him to act like someone from the West Wing, someone who had some higher thing that he cared about, and it never happened. And then they had no response to it. That's my main issue.
So, look, I mean, the principle Obama operated under is that we're a diverse country with diverse interests, and they are reflected in the Congress, in our political system, with people with vastly different perspectives on the world than you guys have. And so then the question is, do you try to work with people like that to compromise, or is it all my way or the highway? What gets something
now you're really
accomplished here? Okay,
what are the diverse interests?
What are the diverse interests?
You said we're a country of diverse interests.
Well, obviously,
some people are very Christian and other people are very secular. So those are diverse interests.
But those are not really political interests. Like generally, we have some 90% support for religious pluralism. No one, very few people want to make a theocracy. When you say diverse interests like that, it sounds like, I want to eat spaghetti for dinner. I want to eat, what's another food? I was going to say lasagna, but that's too close to spaghetti. That's not very diverse interest. That sounds like we're closer.
That's intra-party.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say diverse interests, that's what you make it sound like. When I think of diverse interests, I think I own this fucking copper wire factory. I want to pollute this river. I want to dump fucking toxic waste in the poor people neighborhood. And then another interest might be, hey, I live in the poor people neighborhood. I don't want to die, please.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, there are perspectives that the free market system and capitalism is a better way of managing and of having an economy than state-run bureaucrats telling you and I what we should do or what healthcare we should have or whatever.
Protectionism.
I mean, that is, you may not agree, but there are people who legitimately have different philosophical perspectives on the best way for a good society than the ones that you do. And they've got some pretty powerful arguments in their favor by looking, for starters.
No, they don't. False.
Of socialist systems over the many decades and their many failures.
How about
they have powerful arguments. So what are you going to do? They've got powerful arguments.
They've got args on their side.
args. What else? Because that's what it's about. It's about winning in the battle of ideas. It's not a contest of powers. It's not we have more people in our coalition than you do because they have a common interest that unites them and that we can dictate to you, the small minority who would literally exploit them for profit. No. It's a battle of ideas.
First, we win the argument on Facebook against my racist brother-in-law. Then we win the argument at the Thanksgiving table against my ingrate Bernie bro nephews. Then we win the argument on the podcast. Then we win.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think like that thing there, like he's pitching about the diverse interests in this country, and what are you going to do to compromise with them? We're like, we have to come together. It's a diverse nation. Blah blah blah. Interests. I think it's very telling because it gets to your point exactly, Matt, about how politics is not about having good arguments. It's about wielding power. And the fact of the matter is, the left doesn't have any power. So that when someone like you, articulates your vision of politics, then it becomes a question about like persuasion and articulating a point and winning an argument or compromising to get a portion of what you want. But this is fascinating because the Republicans control all three branches of government, and they like Isikoff and people like that. The terms of that debate are very different. Like the Republicans are never ever expected to how about we just have some abortion, somewhere, or like how about like we only
little abortion.
Yeah, just have it just like a half of the tax cut that we want. It's just like they don't have to because they have the power. They have the power to impose, again, as a minority, to impose their will on the rest of us. So strangely, it's never incumbent on them to compromise their vision, or conversely, for the centrist Democrats or liberals to compromise with the left, broadly speaking. It's always to compromise with the right.
I think it's because they view the right as a undifferentiated atavistic mass that cannot be reasoned with. It's just a fact of life. And that governing is done by they're the Morlocks. And then you got the Eloi, whose job it is to like govern and figure out how to apportion things and keep them in their Chick-fil-A and Golden Corral, all you can eat fucking chocolate wonderful.
It's the alpha pluses and the epsilons.
Absolutely. And so it's like, how do we negotiate with this black throbbing force that's within us?
This eldritch horror.
Yeah. And everyone else is sort of like the left and the liberals are all on the same side of civilization against this uncivilized horde, which can't be reasoned with. And so therefore, all politics becomes a question of negotiating with this unreasoning force. But if you're on the left, well, you know better. You're not a savage. You're not an oaf. You're not a Morlock. You need to be reasoned with. You need to be dealt with. We need to make a deal.
They're also mad that we were angry.
That was insane. When the guy asked, "Are you angry?" I was just like like I was saying, I was panicked when we got in there because like, are we going to get owned? And then they started asking questions. And about 5 minutes into it, I realized
They have nothing.
Nothing.
This is nothing that I haven't heard from a dozen like sad centrist accounts on Twitter.
We've been making fun
a
of
guy
this
talking about like how having his celebrating Christmas alone with his pot pie and his black coffee. He has the same owns that these professional fucking journalists have.
These are like literally 30 plus year Beltway veterans, and it's like you just sound like the fucking imbecile accounts we've been owning for 10 years.
Yeah, like I think I forget who said this, but what this comes down to is that like for the leftists, you hear this, it's like, this is your fucking argument? This is nothing. We've been hearing this, we've been arguing this about our entire lives. But for people like Isikoff, they've only been in social situations where these people smugly say these owns back and forth. They've never heard a response to one, so they assume there isn't one.
And
it's like, well, have they considered Venezuela? And then they chuckle over their Chardonnays, and then they talk to someone who actually has heard that 5 million goddamn times and knows a fucking response, and they literally have no way to deal with it.
Which is why there was no follow-up to any of your answers.
Well,
They
that
just
was
moved-
what-
they just moved on.
Because
That
that's
was the funny thing,
because they were operating under the fiction that, oh, okay, we're getting them on the record. This is just like a hardball interview. When Isikoff gives away the game because he can't resist doing his dinner table owns.
Yeah, and then when we respond and he has nothing to say, it's like, well, let's go to the next question on the sheet. It's like, how is that not, since you're the one making the questions, how is all of that not an admission that you have no response?
So
because you're the one who decides what the questions are.
So I want to play one more quick clip here, and this is a good segue into what we will be talking about for the rest of the episode. They pivoted to the election, and by what they wanted to talk about was, okay, Pete Buttigieg, will you support him if he's the nominee? Okay, next up, Amy Klobuchar, will you support her if she's the nominee? And I swear to God, if Matt hadn't told him to shut the fuck up, they would have just gone down the list of everyone.
What if Michael Bennett were the nominee? Would you support him? John Delaney, if he were the nominee, would you support him?
So eventually, Matt delivered this excellent response.
What about Klobuchar?
I don't care.
Yeah,
I live in New York, as I said. It's not,
For me, I mean, it really depends what the general election campaign, how that shakes out.
All right. So this is a maybe vote for Klobuchar if she's the
but
nominee.
here's what's absurd about the question. We know that what people like Mayor Pete and Klobuchar are saying now, as kind of frankly shitty as what they're saying now is, what they're going to be saying in 8 months is going to be different all over again.
More broadly.
So if Amy Klobuchar, if she gets the nomination and then pivots at the convention and says, I'm a Nazi, I am a national socialist in the Hitler kind, and I'm more of a Nazi than Trump, sir. and I want to. She says that she wants to make America a white ethno state and murder all the minorities. I would not support her.
Right.
I would want her to lose.
Rather than asking about you guys, let me ask you where you think your audience would be if you obviously have this very intense Bernie bro audience. If Bernie doesn't get the nomination, and it's not Warren, who I assume would be your second pick, and it's one of the others, Biden, Buttigieg,
A lot more on that
Klobuchar,
later.
Where do you think your audience?
I'll tell you
would
this,
be?
and I hope everyone listening who is on the fence, maybe they don't like Bernie, maybe they don't think he can win or whatever. I'll tell you right this: our audience will, as a block, refuse to vote for whoever gets the nomination, which means
Wait, if it's not Bernie.
yes, which means that for everybody who, as you said, is concerned first and foremost with defeating Trump, they are morally obligated to vote for Bernie in the primaries, because he is the only one who has a significant chunk of people who will not vote for the nominee, which means you have to pick him, because if he doesn't get the nomination, you're SOL. So if you're really concerned, as you said earlier, with electability,
right,
you have to pick Bernie.
Okay.
God bless Matthew B. Stats. Matt Burdig, the ultimate response to all this shit about will you vote is no. So you have to pick Bernie.
Yeah.
If you care about electability, you have to pick Bernie, because the Bernie bros won't vote for any alternative.
Yeah, shout out to Matty B and Carl Bayer too, who is also a pioneer of this particular line of argumentation.
And it's undefeatable. There's no response.
It's really the perfect answer, because originally the way this conversation went was they were asking us as individuals who we might vote for, and Matt says, "I live in New York. What do you fucking care? What does it matter?" I think that it doesn't matter anywhere what your individual voting decision is, because that's just like, what do you fucking care? That's just saying politics just boils down to basically an individual consumer choice.
Well, what it is that they're trying, because the big problem for the centrists, I've been thinking about this, and this is what I've come up with. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. The big issue for the centrists is that they prize their moral high ground they have vis-a-vis the Republicans. It's their entire identity. And they are, one of the reasons they hate leftists so much is because leftists take the moral high ground from them, leaving them to have to say, like, look, you might have more these ideals, but I live in the real world, you fucking little pieces of shit. And one of the few ways that they can try to regain the high ground morally is to say, well, yes, the greater danger, as we would all agree, are these horrible Republicans, which means if you won't vote for whoever our nominee is, then you're a bad person. And it's purely about psychically feeling superior. But what they don't realize is that they have opened the door. And it's like, if you care about this hard-boiled shit about just winning at all costs, then guess what? The guy with the biggest group of voters who won't show up to vote for the nominee if it's not them, I'm sorry, he is the winner of any argument about electability.
The other thing that I rolled around in my head was, again, it doesn't matter what I decide to do. I probably would, if the nominee is anyone but Bernie, I probably wouldn't make up my mind until Election Day, honestly.
Yeah.
But something that does matter is what people would collectively do if someone like Pete Buttigieg won the nomination. And something I realized was, if Pete Buttigieg were the nominee, it's not just whether or not I'd vote for him, it's whether I would do anything on his behalf. Yeah. And the answer is I would do nothing for him. You would do nothing for Pete Buttigieg.
I would not. I like honestly, like if it was, I mean, I wouldn't have to wait that long. I mean, living in New York City, I would not vote for Pete Buttigieg.
Well, it's not even vote. Again, it's, would you volunteer for him?
I would not.
Would you donate money to him? Would you like defend him against the Republican attacks when they swift boat him about
I would not lift
military record?
And our show would not talk about him in any positive way.
Would you hold back from criticizing
ignore the presidential election if it was those guys?
I mean, would you even hold back from criticizing
Not
him?
in the slightest.
No, and that's honestly the sentiment. Like, whether or not they're willing to say it, that's really the sentiment from most people that I know and people that I'm familiar with who are like prominent Bernie supporters. It's like not that, all the Bernie people will get absorbed into Pete Buttigieg's general election campaign. It's that, well, all right, fuck off.
No, I mean, if Bernie does not get the nomination, then it's no longer my problem.
Absolutely.
It's yours.
It's not my race.
It's like it's your problem now. Like, good luck.
And the thing that they like to harp on, and the thing that they have used in the past, is always, well, look, we have to do the most to mitigate harm. Now that you don't have your nominee, we have to mitigate harm. But a large percentage, and I would say a significant enough to maybe even determine the outcome percentage of Bernie supporters, see this election, I know I do, as the last off-ramp to apocalypse. So I'm sorry, in the long term, there is no difference between a Biden presidency and a second Trump term. There is no difference between a Mayo Pete term and a Trump term, in that we are not bending the curve away from Armageddon enough for it to matter.
So the question isn't really, do I support, if Pete were the nominee, would I support Pete or a third party candidate? The question is more, would I even care about the electoral process at that point?
I think one thing that really gives it away is the number of people who are pre-angry at Tulsi Gabbard because they see her doing a third party run and then like being the nadir of 2020. And you could, when you see the people mad at Tulsi, like they're all heading themselves up as Putin is going to get her to be the third party and she's going to split the debt and it's like, you know what? That might happen if you nominate a Biden or a Buttigieg. But guess what? You don't have to nominate a Biden or a Buttigieg. If Bernie's the nominee, there's basically a 0% chance that Tulsi runs some disaffected leftist third party candidacy. That's not going to happen.
So I've been rolling this around in my head, which tack makes more sense to give the threat and essentially make the argument that, okay, you have to support Bernie if you want to beat Trump, because you've said that beating Trump is your only issue. It's not the most salient issue. It's the only issue, which means by definition, you do not care about anything else. You don't care about policy differences. You don't care about like who was the better health plan or whatever, who was the better vision for the country.
Right.
You don't even care who the fucking nominee is. You just want a meat sack that will beat Trump. And that means you have to support Bernie.
It's true.
If we make the argument that Bernie supporters as a block, a big chunk of them, will not vote for any other nominee. And I mean, let me finish this thought. And like that can backfire, I think, and just make people more pissed off, because that's essentially asking them to call their bluff and say, okay, either you do that or you concede that you're a liar and you're actually perfectly fine with 4 years of Trump, which most of them are, because here's the thing, you could not factually make that argument. I saw a recent opinion survey that asked supporters of the top 4 candidates, okay, if your guy doesn't win, will you support, whoever the nominee is? It's something like 10-15% of Biden supporters, 10-15% of people who just supporters will not support the ticket. That percentage for Bernie supporters who will take their ball and go home, 4%, according to one survey.
Like I would say, knowing our listeners to the extent that I do, I would imagine that like a good percentage of them will vote for Elizabeth Warren, or if you live in a swing state, just hold their nose and vote for the Democrat. But I think it gets to your point, Virgil. It's really more about, will I do anything actively to help this campaign or say anything nice about it?
Will I fight for this thing?
Will I fight for it to happen? Will I be really invested in the outcome? No, not really. I mean, again, like, gun to my head, would I want a Democrat or Republican to win this election? Like, I guess I'll choose the Democrat. But like, to me, that's like not really like something I emotionally feel in my core. You know what I mean? And the thing is, like, it is about calling their bluff, because they're all bluffing. They're all bluffing.
I think some voters aren't bluffing. I think a lot of voters do genuinely care about electability, and I think that's Biden's pitch. But among the pundit class who say they care about electability, I would say it's close to 100% are full of shit.
Yeah, it's a gotcha, and for the reasons that I laid out, you should never take any of that seriously. And fortunately, the vast majority of voters do not care about any of this shit.
Yeah,
I saw a post from a guy I follow who said, one of the questions I didn't expect to get while canvassing for Bernie was, who the fuck is Bernie Sanders? And that's kind of where a lot of people are, because a lot of people are
they're not paying attention.
They're not listening to skullduggery.
No.
They're not listening to the Beltway wisdom.
The vast majority of people make their decisions, as we've discussed before, 2 weeks out ahead of time.